It's lovely seeing a lot of faces here interested in this conversation. My name is Nidhi Sudhan. We'll just do a bit of introduction about who we are so you get an idea about why we are talking about this sitting here. Um, I run a non-profit organization called Citizen Digital Foundation. We're based out of Trivandrum, Kerala. And this is about making technologies safer, more responsible, and more accountable. So we have three verticals. One is information literacy for end users of technology, responsible tech advisory and advocacy for businesses and startups, and policy, any form of informed action and policy that we could help with the government. So that's about me. Jibu, do you want to give a background?
Yeah, so my name is Jibu Elias. I am country lead for Responsible Computing and Mozilla Foundation and responsible AI fellow with Stimson Center in USA. Look at mostly into the social impact of technologies like AI, and I think we will get started with this session. So we are talking about innovation and why diverse perspective or diversity is important in innovation. So Nidhi, I will open with a simple question, very simple foundation question. What does innovation means to you?
Thanks, Jibu. And I think for a bit, we'd also like to hear your opinions because you are here in the Innovation Showcase Lounge. So we'll just introduce the initial bits and then we'd also like to hear your thoughts. So Jibu, innovation as such, if you were to look at the definition, it's about creating something new, right? The one thing that we understand about innovation is that this is not something that you would pick up when you want to go with the flow or be in the comfort zone. You want to push the limits of what is known, the knowledge limits as such, to be able to come up with a solution that possibly will enhance or improve everyone's lives. And everyone being the key word there, right? I think Henry Ford's most famous example is that if you asked everyone about what's the best way to reach from point A to point B, it would be faster horses. But that was not the solution. You come up with cars, right? So beginning from that, today we are in an ecosystem which helps startups come up with ideas, makes it easier for you to innovate, makes it easier for us to put our ideas into action. But while we're doing so, we also at some point reach a ceiling where we stop asking the difficult questions. So we see a lot of innovation around the spaces of, let's say, mental health or making lives easier for people or even grocery delivery in quick minutes. But at the end of the day, is that the only thing that we're trying to do? If we're trying to solve for a narrow goal, is that where our innovation ends? What if it has other consequences? What if there are people who are getting affected by it in good and bad ways without us realizing it? How do we solve for that? Do we factor that in? So those are the difficult questions that makes innovation a non-comfort zone. So that's my idea. Jibu, what do you think?
So I agree with what you said, but there is this innovation, the term itself has become a cliche. If you look, right, from Steve Jobs, who actually innovated, to certain self-professed startup visionaries in India, truly use this word to this extent, right? Like Nidhi, you mentioned, I don't think delivering groceries in 5 minutes is innovation, right? Like if you look at innovation, things that's been propped up by innovation in India, the only genuine innovation I really got fascinated by is UPI, right? Apart from that, everything is either a replica of what that's already existed outside or these kind of things. And I mean, we both are familiar with the space of AI. So now the new innovation is to add AI to everything, right? So the idea of innovation is not just adding, bringing something new. It's also about how do you challenge the status quo to create that change, right? And that's where, how do you challenge existing beliefs? That's where diverse ideas are more critical. And I want to say these things here. I mean, I don't know how many of you knew about Edwin Hubble. Have you guys heard about Edwin Hubble? Okay, so if you haven't heard about Edwin Hubble, he's the man who discovered that the universe is expanding, which is a very prominent discovery in the world of physics. And he's being credited a lot of these major accomplishments in cosmology. And even there's a space telescope named after him, Hubble Space Telescope. But what people don't know is that most of his work was done on top of this lady called Henrietta Leavitt, who was a computer. Okay, so essentially the term computer was used for is people who did maths by hand. You know, and so there were human computers before the machine computers. So she is the one who actually invented the parallax effect where you can measure the distance based on a light coming from a star. But how many of us know her, right? We all know Edwin Hubble. I think he might have got a Nobel Prize or things named after him. But so that's why I'm saying it's a diverse perspective that made this such discovery possible. But at the same time, the people like in that generation, the women behind it were kept hidden, or we don't know about them. So that's one of the reasons why we need to now credit the people who are driving real innovation and also bring them forward. That's one of my thoughts. Just want to add with that.
Anybody wants to share their thought on innovation?
What do you guys think about innovation? Anybody want to say what is your perspective on innovation? Does 5-minute grocery delivery? You want to add something?
Yeah.
No, I can hear you. Just give me your name also, okay?
Hey, good morning, by the way. I'm Vijay from Amazon. I work as a engineering leader in Amazon for about last few years. So yeah, as the lead LP, one of our leadership principles says, we just don't consider thing big alone as an innovation. So for that matter, even invent and simplify is another principle. We abide by it, and we also hire the talents and retain for that matter. So why I say so, right? So I come from the world of development and also into the maintenance architecture. So not necessarily every idea has to be, invested or get funded in. So according to me as a leader, if I look back, right? So one thing what I really was a wow factor for me too is if somebody even optimizes an SD effort by automating a tool or something like that, that goes a big time. So that saves their productivity, and also that helps to make somebody's lives better. Of course, there are big ticket items like Alexa and how Google is launching some of the products. But definitely, in my perspective, not necessarily something a big ticket item. Even though I am a Steve Jobs follower, as you said, not necessarily everything has to be tagged to that. That's my perspective.
Yeah, true.
Thanks, Vijay. Thanks for sharing that perspective, because it's important to look into the nuances of these discussions. And maybe this may not be enough time for us to delve into a lot of things, but let us begin with that question next. What is the importance of diverse perspectives? And when we talk about diverse perspectives, it includes the fact that it begins with diverse teams, having diverse data, and ensuring that the opinions and perspectives and also the people who are influenced, all the stakeholders, all their opinions are factored into how we create products or how we develop newer products or innovate further. So, Jibu, I want to ask you, what is your understanding of diversity and what is the importance of that in driving tech innovation from where it is now to the next stage?
So there is two aspects to that, right? Why we speak about need to have diverse teams is that we have seen what happens when diversity is not in certain teams. For example, look at Amazon's hiring tool, which ended up hiring only white male, recruitment tool. Or we have seen from time to time how many of the AI tools that have been deployed, whether it's Compass or facial recognition tools, right? Many law enforcement agencies across the world has been using these facial recognition tools. But the reality is that from time and time again, studies and studies again, even by Google or other academicians, have proved that they have a bad record when it comes to recognizing people with color. And in the last couple of years, if you look back, there are so many cases of wrongful accusations, jail times, people whose careers were destroyed, people whose social life were devastated, all because of wrongful accusation based on a negative or a false facial recognition. So why is this things happening? Because the lack of diverse data sets. Why there is a lack of diverse data sets? Because there is a lack of diversity in the team. And we also know that, there is this series in YouTube called Everything is a Remix. It's a very interesting series. And it's a very old, it's like 10, 15 years old, where this creator says that there is nothing, it's very difficult to create something completely new. What happens is you take X and Y from two spaces, or A and B, and you merge it, right? how can you do that going forward when you don't get that kind of diverse idea? So the diversity in idea matters, and that's what diversity in culture, diversity in thinking, and diversity in perspective adds more value in building products.
Thanks, Jibu. I'll just put that in a bit of context. So let us think, I mean, as developers, as innovators, we are on one side of the narrative, but as end users, there is a different narrative that affects all of us. So when we hear about issues of facial recognition, when we hear about issues of discrimination happening, we sometimes think that it's happening to people of some other income classes or background who may not be as privileged. We are safe for now is often the, the comfort that we try to seek. But look at it this way. We are trying to apply for a job, any of us in this room, and we have all our best achievements put in our resume. Let's say something like I was part of the women's soccer team, I was part of the women's club in our institution, educational institution. And our resume gets rejected by an automation system which a company uses. We have no idea why it's getting rejected. We assume that there's something missing in us, and that's probably why it was getting rejected. This is one example, and the reason why this example that Jibu shared came out into the public was because that was a big tech company and it had a governance system in place, which was able to flag that there is an issue with how the machine is learning from historical data, and there is a bias that has inadvertently crept in. It was not intentional, but it crept in because the machine was learning from previous data. And the reason there was a flagging process was why the platform was able to take that system down, the bias system down. Similarly, the facial recognition data, there's a book called Unmasking AI by Dr. Joy Bolamani, who's also made a short documentary called Coded Bias. If you could catch it sometime, that would give a lot of perspective. Facial recognition technology is the most advanced one created by the most advanced companies in the world, was serving law enforcement purposes in the US. And they recognize, like Jibu rightly said, that there is a bias in how much accuracy of facial recognition is there for darker-skinned men or darker-skinned women, as opposed to primarily, I don't have to preach to the choir here because the data set is primarily white and primarily Caucasian. There is a bias in the data. So what US law enforcement did is they decided not to use these facial recognition technologies provided, and they said until the point that you're 100% accurate, we're not going to use this. So what do those platforms do then? They ship it to countries like India, because here nobody is asking these difficult questions, right? So that is why it is important that all of our organizations functioning in India, whether it's big or small or a new startup, have these protocols of governance, ethical questioning, ensuring that we don't have biases creep in without our knowledge, because nobody wants to intentionally cause harm, right? The other reason that I want to add to why diversity is important, so Verna Myers, who was the diversity and inclusion head with Netflix a few years back, has said a statement which was quite powerful, and at the first level, it's quite interesting to explain why. Diversity is like being invited to the party. You're being invited to the party, and that's diversity or representation. Whereas inclusion is being asked to dance. So you can be a token representation on a table, at a table, or in an organization. But remember the difference, and I'm going to use a cooking analogy to make it a little bit more clear. The important thing is not just leave it with diversity. You are not just a sprinkle on a cake or a garnishing on a dish. We are supposed to be the condiments, the spices that make the dish what it is. Right? So that is inclusion. So going beyond diversity is the question that we need to ask within organizations to ensure that the participation is equal.
Just to add, asking you a question, right? So what can we do about it? Like now we are asking a question, right? We're moving from diversity, why we need inclusion. And I have seen, or to an extent, I am a victim of this tokenism in many areas, right? You know, we need a guy from India, right? And often I end up that guy. So, and you being one of the renowned women in AI ethics. So what can we do? We know why inclusion and diversity is beneficial for innovation, but what can we do about it? What can companies do about it?
Thanks, Shibu. That's a very important question because often we leave it at the superficial rhetorics. But the question of what to do, the action is that there are AI governance frameworks available for all organizations to follow. Nobody is going to score 100 on an ethical AI score, risk assessment or a framework that is put out there. The goal is not to score 100% either. As a small startup, if you start asking those questions at the planning, development, deployment, and monitoring stages of your tech, whether it's tech or AI or ML, the important question is that you know what those questions are. There are NIST frameworks, there's the OECD framework, there is, in India, we have the NASSCOM RI framework, which are all addressing all these 4 stages of innovation. We at CDF, at Citizen Digital Foundation, have compiled 5 global frameworks, including the NASSCOM RI framework, to form a questionnaire. It's a very expansive questionnaire, around 170 questions. But if you go through with your teams who are developing your products, ask those questions. Do we have diverse data? Do we have monitoring systems that ensure that if we catch a bias, we are able to replace it? Are there adversarial training processes involved? How do we detect for bias? Who is the oversight body who is auditing our products? Do we have affected communities and experts that are external also auditing our products? It's quite like how some of the other frameworks for compliance exist. But since in India we don't have a regulation yet which is strong and it requires companies to do it necessarily, it then falls upon the company's good intent to follow corporate governance protocols wherein tech and AI governance protocols can be followed. And these are available for organizations that seek it out. So if you start the process now, when you have regulation, let's say 2 or 3 years down the line, you're sorted. You don't have to do a last minute scrambling for, okay, ab ye legal paper bharna hai, this we have to do, this we have to do. Nothing like that if you follow a corporate governance approach towards that. And then your products will speak for itself. The customers will, all your stakeholders will recognize that you're factoring in as much of these unintended consequences early on. And that will speak for your bottom lines at the end of the day.
So what we are trying to do, so there is another approach what we can also look into is what from my side, what we are doing with Mozilla's responsible computing challenges, why do we wait till things goes wrong? Why do we wait till, people get hired and then they make tools without thinking through? I think yesterday also there was this conversation in the opening keynote, right, which was very interesting, right, where this question of edge cases was mentioned. I don't know if you remember. Yes. So what we are trying to do with responsible computing challenges to look at the underrepresented minorities, right? It can be in terms of gender or other aspects. So what we are trying to do is we are trying to empower academicians or faculties in universities. Let's rethink the computer science curriculum, right? Let's rethink it. It's not enough that we do everything from a tech perspective, everything from a coding perspective. What if we incorporate elements from other aspects, from sociology or gender studies and other things? And how do we ensure the next generation of technologists already have these ideas and notions inbuilt in them rather than coming and ending up in these kind of scenarios? So one of the examples what we are working out is, so there is this high school for visually impaired in my hometown. So I often visit there, and as a big believer of technology, I'm a techno solutionist guy. Technology can solve everything. So I go there and I interact with the principal and others, and they tell me all the problems. So they tell me that the biggest challenge they have faced with these visually impaired students, they have like at least 100 students every year coming through the high school, is that they all end up taking up something like BA Sociology or BA History, BA Malayalam Literature, English Literature, or Kannada Literature, right? And why is that? I'm not saying these aren't bad subjects. I'm a BA History graduate, so I love my history. But what if you have someone who is aspiring to become a programmer, who's aspiring to become a mathematician, and then you are telling, you know what, because of this particular disability you have to now take something like another area which you might not be keen on. Now the principal was telling me it's very difficult to get these students understand many of this fundamental scientific and computational concept because of the challenges with the current curriculum, the way curriculum is built. So then I was like, I don't believe that. We have so many accessibility tools, right? You know, all those things. And then he showed me the textbook. This is the textbook government has provided us. And there is that's an accessibility feature, yes. So there's a textbook. You scan a QR code. It will open a PDF of the same page. That's what accessibility means to government. So in these kind of scenarios, right? So then I am saying, what about the features in Apple, Windows, all the Mac, all these features, Android, accessibility features. So the other challenge they told me is, these are built by normal people, thinking that this is how a visually impaired person might use it. So that has resulted us to rethink the whole thing. So we have a project working on it. How do we rethink internet for people with this kind of challenges? How do we make sure that the diverse perspective from people with person of disabilities are also incorporated when we are building, when we are innovating? How do that innovation benefits them as well? So I will stop here.
Thanks. So that is the entire spectrum of diversity that we need to think about, right? It does not just end with gender. It's also about race, class, religion, ability, and everything. The example that you mentioned about you traveling abroad, all of us, right? Asian men, when Asian men travel abroad to Western countries, they are subject to facial recognition systems in immigration queues, which somehow typecasts or profiles them as a certain category which may not be very friendly to enter into organization or into the countries as such. So these are things to watch out for. It is not about the rich and poor always. It's not about the privileged versus non-privileged. It could happen to any of us. In the interest of time, I just want to quickly ask Jibu, so what is that one takeaway that you will give today for everybody who's present here as that summarizes the topic that we're discussing here about power of different perspectives?
I think it will be I think it can be like, stop thinking just innovation. What is meaningful innovation, right? I mean, I don't want to use the responsible innovation word, but what does meaningful innovation means to you, right? What does impactful innovation means to each of us? And how we can stop thinking these things in, like when it comes to inclusion, how we can't stop thinking it as edge cases. Yeah. So I think that's my one question. What about you, Nidhi?
I always think about this one thing, what is technology? And Jibu just said that, we think that technology can resolve a lot of things. There are two aspects to technology. One is the code of technology. The code of technology focuses on accuracy of results. It is iterative. It is about scaling products, right? It's very binary, it's mathematical, it's very logical. Then there's the other side of technology, which is the spirit of technology. The spirit of technology is inclusive. It is about benefiting everyone alike. How do we ensure that it's creative? It's coming up with the answers in creative ways for difficult solutions. That's the spirit of technology. So I think this here at GHCI, this is a celebration of the code and spirit of technology, and that's something that I'd like the audience to take away, that we should always remember there are these two sides and we should keep both these in mind when we are innovating. That's about it from our side. Any questions? Anybody wants to share any thoughts? We have 2.5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
I think we'll leave the stage if someone wants to add. Thank you.